I never thought the last words I'd hear from my father would be, "You're a disappointment to this family." Yet there I stood at 22, suitcase in hand, watching the door slam in my face. 7 years later, they appeared on my doorstep, drowning in debt and desperate for the help of the daughter they'd thrown away. Life has a strange way of coming full circle when you least expect it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I was always the square peg in my family's perfectly round hole. My name is Alexis Chambers, and I grew up in a household where tradition wasn't just respected, it was the unquestioned blueprint for existence. My parents, Richard and Margaret Chambers, had their lives mapped out since high school. College sweethearts who married after graduation, bought a charming colonial in the suburbs of Cincinnati, and produced 2 children right on schedule. My older brother, Thomas, followed their path with the precision of a trained soldier. Business degree, corporate job, marriage to his college girlfriend by 25, and a baby announcement by 27. And then there was me. From the moment I could form coherent thoughts, I questioned everything. Why did we go to church every Sunday when Dad complained about it every Saturday night? Why did Mom join clubs she clearly hated? Why was Thomas's mediocre career in finance celebrated while my perfect grades were simply expected? The questions earned me labels: difficult, stubborn, overthinking. By high school, I'd added more to the collection: rebellious, alternative, problematic. It wasn't that I was trying to be difficult. I simply couldn't understand why conformity was valued over authenticity. When I dyed my hair purple for the first time at 16, you would have thought I'd committed a felony. The disappointment in my mother's eyes when she saw me could have filled an ocean. "What will the neighbors think, Alexis? What will Pastor Mitchell say?" She frantically tried to wash it out that night, crying when the color barely faded. "It's just hair, Mom," I'd said, watching her through the bathroom mirror. "It doesn't change who I am." "But it changes how people see us," she replied, emphasis on us, as if my individual choices were property of the collective Chambers family image. That was the dynamic, my existence as an extension of their reputation, not as a person with my own dreams and identity. Thomas understood the game and played it flawlessly. I could never bring myself to pick up the cards. The irony was that, beneath my questioning nature and occasional rebellious streak, I was excelling in ways that should have mattered. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school. I was published in the school literary magazine. I won state-level competitions, in both math and science. But these achievements were acknowledged with the tepid enthusiasm of expected performance, while Thomas's promotion to junior account manager warranted a family dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. During my senior year of high school, the friction intensified when college decisions arrived. I'd been accepted to several prestigious universities, including my parents' alma mater, Ridgefield University. But I'd also received a full scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design for their digital media program. Art school? My father had scoffed, tossing the acceptance letter onto the kitchen table as if it were contaminated. "What kind of career can you possibly build with that?" "Digital media isn't just art, Dad," I'd tried to explain. "It's marketing, interface design, user experience. It's the future of how businesses connect with customers." "It's a hobby, not a career," he'd countered. "Ridgefield has an excellent business program. Your mother and I both studied there, and it served us well. Thomas thrived there too." The argument raged for weeks. My mother occasionally attempted to mediate, but ultimately sided with my father. "We just want what's best for you, honey. Security, stability, a clear path forward." What they couldn't understand was that their vision of security felt like suffocation to me. Their clear path looked like a prison sentence. In the end, I chose RISD and the scholarship. The day I announced my decision, my father's face hardened. in a way I'd never seen before. "You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life," he said quietly. "Don't come crying to us when you're waiting tables with an art degree and drowning in regret." My mother was more tactful but equally disapproving. "I just don't understand why you always have to take the difficult road, Alexis. Life doesn't have to be such a struggle." What they never grasped was that conformity would have been the real struggle for me. Pretending to be someone I wasn't. That was the difficult road I refused to walk. The summer before college was a Cold War in the Chambers household. Polite conversation at dinner. Minimal interaction beyond necessity. Thomas tried to play peacemaker during his occasional visits, but even he didn't truly understand my choices. "Just give them what they want," he advised one evening as we sat on the back porch swing. "Go to Ridgefield for a year, then transfer, if you still want to. It's not that hard." "It's not about the school, Thomas," I tried to explain. "It's about being allowed to make my own choices. If I cave on this, I'll be caving for the rest of my life." He shook his head, that familiar look of bemused pity on his face. "You always make everything so complicated, Lexi." When August arrived and it was time to leave for Providence, the goodbye was perfunctory. My mother hugged me with tears in her eyes, but they felt more like mourning than love. My father shook my hand, and reminded me that decisions have consequences. "The path you're choosing is yours alone," he said stiffly. "Remember that." It felt more like a threat than advice. College became my liberation. At RISD, surrounded by other creative minds who valued innovation over tradition, I flourished. My questioning nature was suddenly an asset rather than a liability. Professors praised my critical thinking and willingness to challenge established norms. For the first time, I felt valued for exactly who I was. I threw myself into my studies with fervor, eager to prove my parents wrong about my chosen field. I joined the design club, took extra workshops, and secured an on-campus job at the Media Lab to avoid asking my parents for additional financial support. During my sophomore year, I landed a competitive internship with a digital marketing firm in Boston, commuting 2 hours each way twice a week. Meanwhile, the distance between my parents and me grew. Weekend visits home dwindled to major holidays only, then to just Christmas. Phone calls became perfunctory check-ins. "Yes, classes are fine. No, I don't need anything. Yes, the weather is cold in Rhode Island too." The final fracture happened during my senior year. I'd been offered a prestigious position with Trendline Interactive, a cutting-edge digital media agency in Brooklyn. The starting salary was impressive for a new graduate, $68,000 plus benefits, and the career trajectory was promising. Excited to finally have vindication for my choices, I called my parents with the news. "That's in New York?" my mother asked, concern evident in her voice. "That's such an expensive city, Alexis. You'll be living paycheck to paycheck." "Actually, Mom, the salary is really good, and the company helps with relocation. I'll be fine." Was her noncommittal response. "Well, Thomas just bought a house in Pleasant Ridge. 4 bedrooms. They're thinking about starting a family next year." The comparison was clear and cutting. My father was even less supportive. "Digital media," he scoffed. "These internet companies come and go like seasonal allergies. No stability. You should be looking at established corporations with pension plans and clear advancement tracks." "Dad, this is one of the top firms in the industry," I protested. "They work with Fortune 500 clients. It's not some fly-by-night startup. I'm just saying, a business degree from Ridgefield would have opened doors to real opportunities. Not this creative experiment." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that this conversation was happening over the phone, that I was nearly 1,000 miles away, that in a few months I would have my degree and my new life in New York. Their approval, while still desired on some fundamental level, was no longer necessary for my survival. Graduation approached, and with it came the question of the ceremony. My parents confirmed they would attend, though their response lacked enthusiasm. I sent them information about travel and accommodations, even researched restaurants for the post-ceremony dinner. 2 weeks before graduation, Thomas called me. His voice was tight, uncomfortable. "Listen, Lexi, there's been a change of plans. Mom and Dad can't make it to your graduation." "What? Why not?" I asked, a familiar sinking feeling in my stomach. "Dad's company is having an important client retreat that weekend. Last-minute thing. Really important accounts. Mom's going with him as a spouse. They can't miss one day of a corporate retreat for their daughter's college graduation?" Thomas sighed. "They said you'd react this way. Look, it's not personal." "How? Is it not personal, Thomas? What would they have done if this was your graduation?" His silence was answer enough. I hung up without saying goodbye, then turned off my phone. The hurt was profound, but underneath it was a simmering anger I'd never fully allowed myself to feel. For years, I'd accepted their dismissal of my choices with sad resignation, still hoping somewhere deep down that they would eventually see me, really see me, and be proud. That night, I made a decision. I was done seeking their approval. Done measuring my worth against their narrow metrics of success. Done feeling like the family disappointment for daring to chart my own course. I graduated with honors, my name appearing multiple times in the ceremony program for various awards and distinctions. My senior project had been featured in an industry publication. 2 of my professors had written glowing recommendation letters that helped secure my position at Trendline. By any objective measure, I was succeeding brilliantly. If my parents couldn't see that, it reflected their limitations, not mine. After graduation, I moved directly to New York without returning to Cincinnati. I shipped most of my belongings and gave away what wouldn't fit in my tiny first apartment in Bushwick. It was a 5th-floor walk-up with unreliable heat and a shared bathroom down the hall. But it was mine, the beginning of my independent life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I threw myself into my new job with the same intensity I'd applied to my studies. Digital media was indeed the future, and I found myself at the forefront of emerging technologies and strategies. My questioning nature and ability to think beyond established parameters made me valuable to clients looking for fresh approaches. 6 months into my position, I was assigned to lead a campaign for a major athletic apparel company. My concept, centered around user-generated content and emerging social platforms, exceeded all engagement metrics and led to a substantial increase in sales. The client specifically requested me for their follow-up campaigns. By the end of my first year, I'd been promoted to senior creative strategist with a significant salary increase. I sent my parents emails with updates on my career, still hoping somewhere deep down for acknowledgement. Their responses were polite but distant, always circling back to news about Thomas and his growing family, or community events in Cincinnati, that held no relevance to my life in New York. During my second year at Trendline, I was headhunted by Visionary, one of the top 3 digital media agencies in the country. The offer was substantial, nearly double my current salary plus stock options. When I called my parents to share the news, my father's first response was, "Is this another one of those internet companies? How stable are they?" "They're a publicly traded company with offices in 12 countries, Dad," I replied, trying to keep the exasperation from my voice. "They handle digital strategy for some of the largest corporations in the world." "Well, that's nice, dear," my mother interjected. "Did we tell you Thomas is being considered for partnership at his firm? They're going to make the announcement next month." The pattern was so predictable, it had become almost comical. Almost. I accepted the position at Visionary and moved to a better apartment in Brooklyn. At 26, I was earning more than Thomas, more than my father had at the peak of his career. I had worked with global brands, had been featured in industry publications, had spoken at conferences. Yet, in my parents' eyes, I remained the family disappointment, the daughter who had rejected their path and whose success, therefore, couldn't be properly celebrated or even acknowledged. The final breaking point came when I returned to Cincinnati for Christmas that year. It had been nearly 18 months since I'd seen my family in person, and some naive part of me hoped that time and distance might have softened the dynamics between us. The first evening was tense but manageable. Thomas, his wife Melissa, and their 2-year-old son dominated the conversation, with my parents doting on their grandson and fishing for details about a possible second baby. I answered questions about New York with simplified descriptions, having learned that detailed explanations of my work only invited dismissal or criticism. On the second day, disaster struck. My mother was looking for photos to show Melissa of Thomas as a baby, digging through boxes in the hall closet. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her gasp, "Richard, come look at this." My father emerged from his study, and I followed out of curiosity. My mother was holding a thick envelope, her face pale. "It's from Ridgefield," she said, her voice tight, "addressed to Alexis, from 3 years ago." I stepped forward and took the envelope from her trembling hands. Inside was a letter of reconsideration from Ridgefield University's business school, offering me a full scholarship based on my high school achievements. The letter was dated 2 weeks before I'd made my final decision to attend RIEST. "I never saw this," I said slowly, looking up at my parents. "Why didn't you show me this letter?" My father cleared his throat. "It must have gotten misplaced in the mail shuffle. We get so many credit card offers with those university logos." "Dad," I interrupted. "This was opened." I pointed to the torn edge of the envelope. "Someone in this house opened this, read it, and never showed it to me." The silence in the hallway was deafening. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father's jaw tightened in that familiar way. "You wanted me to choose Ridgefield so badly," I said, realization dawning. "Was it because you genuinely thought it was better for me, or because you couldn't stand the idea of me breaking from family tradition?" "You needed guidance," my father finally said. "You were too young to make such an important decision on your own." "So you hid a full scholarship offer from me? You let me believe that RISD was my only viable option with financial aid?" "Ridgefield was the right choice," he insisted. "We were trying to help you avoid a mistake." I felt something break inside me, not my heart, but the last thread of hope that they would ever truly see me, accept me, respect me as an adult with my own mind. "A mistake," I repeated, my voice unnaturally calm. "That's what my life is to you, isn't it? One big mistake because I didn't follow your plan, because I dared to think for myself." "Alexis, you're overreacting," my mother began, reaching for the letter. "It was years ago." "No," I pulled back, clutching the letter. "This isn't about the scholarship. This is about you never, ever respecting my choices. About measuring me against Thomas and finding me wanting because I'm different. About trying to force me into a mold I was never meant to fit." "Young lady, you will not speak to your mother that way," my father's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me?" I asked. "Besides criticize my choices, dismiss my accomplishments, and apparently sabotage my college options." The argument escalated rapidly, years of suppressed feelings erupting like a volcano. Words were said on both sides that couldn't be taken back. My father called my career playing around on computers. I called him controlling and manipulative. My mother cried. Thomas and Melissa took their son upstairs to shield him from the conflict. Finally, my father pointed to the door. "If you're so successful, so independent, So certain we've done nothing for you. Then perhaps you should leave. Richard. My mother started, but he silenced her with a look. No, Margaret. I'm done. I'm done trying to guide someone who thinks she knows everything. I'm done watching her make one rebellious choice after another just to prove she doesn't need our advice. He turned back to me, his face flushed with anger. You want independence? You've got it. But don't come crawling back when this internet bubble bursts and you're left with nothing. This family has standards, traditions, values, and you've rejected all of them. You're a disappointment to this family, Alexis. A disappointment. The words hung in the air like poison gas. My mother's soft gasp was the only sound in the hallway. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the all-knowing patriarch I'd grown up fearing and seeking approval from, but as a limited man terrified of anything outside his narrow understanding of success. I'm only a disappointment because you never bothered to understand what would actually make me happy, I said quietly. I feel sorry for you. I went upstairs, packed my suitcase, and called a cab to take me to the airport. Thomas tried to intervene, suggesting I stay at his house until my scheduled flight in 2 days. This will blow over, Lexi, he insisted. Dad's just upset about that letter thing. Give it a few days. No, Thomas, I replied, zipping my suitcase closed. This isn't about the letter. This is about 26 years of never being good enough because I'm not you. It's not going to blow over with a few days of cooling off. My mother caught me at the front door, tears streaming down her face. Alexis, please don't go like this. Your father didn't mean what he said. Yes, he did, Mom. He's probably been wanting to say it for years. I hugged her briefly. I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep trying to earn approval that's never going to come. My father remained in his study, door firmly closed as I left the house. Standing on the porch with my suitcase, waiting for the cab in the cold December air, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Something had ended, not just that Christmas visit, but the exhausting cycle of seeking validation from people determined not to give it. As the cab pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I was looking forward, toward the life I'd built for myself, the career I loved, the future I would shape on my own terms. What I didn't know then was that the future would eventually bring my parents back into my life in a way none of us could have anticipated. But that reunion was still years away, and I had a life to live in the meantime, a successful, fulfilling life built on the very choices they had deemed mistakes. The first few months after the Christmas confrontation passed in a blur of work and emotional processing. I threw myself into projects at Visionary with renewed intensity, channeling my hurt and anger into creative productivity. My colleagues noticed the change. I was first to arrive, last to leave, always volunteering for challenging assignments and tight deadlines. You're going to burn out at this pace, my direct supervisor, Natasha, warned during a late night when we were both still at the office. She was a brilliant creative director in her early 40s who had become both mentor and friend. Whatever you're running from, Alexis, it'll still be there when you exhaust yourself. I looked up from my computer, surprised by her perceptiveness. Is my work suffering? Quite the opposite. Your work is exceptional, but you're not a machine. No one can sustain this intensity indefinitely. That conversation was the first crack in the armor I'd constructed after leaving Cincinnati. Over dinner at a tiny Thai restaurant near the office, I found myself telling Natasha about my family, the Christmas confrontation, and the years of feeling like I was fundamentally flawed for wanting a different path. Your parents sound like they're from another century, she remarked, shaking her head. But you know what's interesting? Even now, you're still trying to prove them wrong, killing yourself with work, aiming for perfection, seeking validation. Through achievement. Her words hit me with uncomfortable accuracy. Despite my declaration of independence, I was still operating within a framework my parents had created, still reacting to their dismissal rather than truly charting my own course. That realization marked the beginning of a deeper personal journey. With Natasha's encouragement, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in family dynamics and cultural expectations. Our weekly sessions helped me untangle the complex web of emotions I'd been carrying. Not just anger and hurt, but also guilt, shame, and a persistent feeling of unworthiness that had driven much of my relentless ambition. Success as rebellion is still letting them define your choices, Dr. Chen observed during one particularly insightful session. What would your life look like if you made decisions based purely on what brings you fulfillment, not as a response to their expectations or disapproval? It was a powerful question that I couldn't immediately answer. What did I truly want, separate from the need to prove my parents wrong? Over the next year, I began the careful work of discovering myself beyond reaction and rebellion. I set boundaries. Around my work hours, making time for friendships and dating, I explored interests outside my career, taking a ceramics class, joining a hiking group that ventured out of the city on weekends, volunteering at a community center teaching digital skills to seniors. These pursuits weren't chosen to build my resume or impress anyone. They were simply activities that brought me joy and connection. The freedom to explore without judgment was both terrifying and exhilarating. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish, though now with healthier boundaries. My campaigns for major clients consistently outperformed industry benchmarks, earning recognition within Visionary and beyond. At 28, I was promoted to Associate Creative Director, becoming one of the youngest executives at the agency. I maintained minimal contact with my family during this period. Occasional text messages with my mother, brief phone calls on major holidays, a card and gift sent for my nephew's birthday. My father and I didn't speak directly at all. Thomas made sporadic efforts to bridge the divide, updating me on family, news, and sending photos of his children, but our conversations remained surface level. The emotional distance was painful but necessary for my healing. On my 29th birthday, everything shifted. I was in the middle of a major presentation to a potential new client when my phone began vibrating repeatedly in my pocket. After the meeting, I checked it to find 6 missed calls and a series of increasingly urgent text messages from Thomas. "Call me ASAP, emergency. Dad had a heart attack, in hospital now. Mom's falling apart, please call." My hands shook as I dialed his number. For all the conflict and distance, these were still my parents, still family. "Thank God," Thomas answered on the first ring. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "In a client meeting. What happened? Is Dad okay?" Thomas explained that our father had collapsed at work that morning. A massive heart attack. He was stable, but in serious condition. The doctors were recommending bypass surgery. "Mom's a wreck," he said, his voice tight with stress. "She keeps saying she can't handle this alone." "Can you come home?" "Please, Lexi. Whatever happened between you guys, this is bigger than that." The old reflexive guilt rose immediately. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "I'll get on the first flight. I can." After arranging emergency leave with Natasha, who was completely understanding, I packed a bag and headed to LaGuardia. On the flight to Cincinnati, anxiety churned in my stomach. I hadn't seen my parents in over 2 years. The last words my father had spoken to me were, "You're a disappointment to this family." Now I was rushing to his hospital bedside, all our unresolved conflict suspended by the immediate crisis of his mortality. Thomas met me at the airport, looking exhausted and older than his 34 years. "Thanks for coming," he said, hugging me tightly. "It's been rough. Dad's scheduled for surgery tomorrow morning." On the drive to the hospital, he filled me in on our father's condition and prognosis. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but emphasized the seriousness of triple bypass surgery, especially for someone with our father's history of high blood pressure and cholesterol. "Has he been having symptoms?" I asked, realizing how little I knew about my parents' lives now. Thomas shrugged. "Apparently he's been having chest pains for months but didn't tell anyone. Classic dad, right? Thinking he can power through anything by sheer stubbornness." I nodded, recognizing the trait all too well. It was one of the few things I'd inherited from him, that stubborn determination, though I'd channeled it differently. At the hospital, we found our mother in the cardiac unit waiting room, small and diminished in an uncomfortable plastic chair. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Alexis," she whispered, standing to embrace me. "You came." "Of course I came. Mom," I said, holding her fragile frame. She had aged noticeably, her hair now completely gray, new lines etched around her eyes and mouth. "Your father will be so relieved," she said, wiping her eyes. "He's been asking if you were coming." I doubted that was true, but I didn't challenge her. "Can I see him?" She nodded. "They're only allowing 2 visitors at a time, and only for 15 minutes each hour. Thomas and I just finished our visit, so you can go in now." Following a nurse's directions, I found myself standing outside my father's room, heart pounding. Through the small window in the door, I could see him lying in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and IV lines. He looked pale and shockingly vulnerable, a stark contrast to the imposing figure who had dominated my childhood. I took a deep breath and entered the room. His eyes were closed, but they opened at the sound of the door. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the beeping of monitors filling the silence between us. Then he spoke, his voice weaker than I remembered. "You cut your hair." It was such an unexpected observation that I laughed reflexively, touching the short bob I'd adopted about a year ago. "Yeah, about a year ago." He nodded slightly. "It suits you." The simple acknowledgement, perhaps the first positive comment he'd made about my appearance since I was a teenager, caught me off guard. I moved closer to his bedside, unsure what to say next. "Thank you for coming," he continued, each word seeming to require effort. "I know Cincinnati isn't high on your list of favorite places these days. You're having heart surgery, Dad. Of course I came." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them to look directly at me. "I've been thinking a lot today. Facing your mortality has a way of clarifying things." I remained silent, waiting. "I was wrong," he said simply. "That Christmas, the things I said, I was wrong." The admission, so unexpected, so contrary to everything I knew about Richard Chambers, rendered me momentarily speechless. In all my childhood and young adult life, I could not recall a single instance of my father admitting he was wrong about anything significant. "The heart attack wasn't completely sudden," he continued. "I'd been having warning signs for months, kept thinking I could push through. This morning, when I collapsed, I was sure I was dying, and all I could think was that I would die with my youngest child believing I thought she was a disappointment." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Dad, you don't have to do this now. You should rest." "No," he interrupted with a flash of his old firmness. "I need to say this. May not get another chance." He drew a labored breath. "I was afraid for you. The path you chose, I didn't understand it. Couldn't see how it led to security, to certainty. And when you succeeded despite ignoring all my guidance, it challenged everything I thought I knew." I sat carefully on the edge of his bed, mindful of the IV lines. "I just wanted you to be proud of me. To see that different doesn't mean wrong." "I know that now," he said quietly. "Your mother shows me articles about you online, award nominations, that campaign for the sportswear company that was everywhere last year. She told me that was yours." I smiled, surprised. "Mom keeps track of my work?" He nodded. "She's got a folder. prints everything she finds with your name on it. The knowledge that my mother had been following my career from afar, collecting evidence of my success like precious artifacts, opened something in my chest. A tight space I hadn't realized was still constricted. I should have told you I was proud, my father continued. I am proud. You built something on your own terms, took risks I never had the courage to take. The 15 minutes passed too quickly. As the nurse came to inform me that visiting time was over, my father reached for my hand, another gesture so uncharacteristic that it startled me. Will you be here tomorrow? After the surgery? I'll be here, I promised, and I meant it. That night, I stayed at Thomas's house, catching up with him and Melissa, meeting my youngest nephew for the first time. The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, years of distance somehow compressed by the immediate reality of our father's condition. The next morning, we gathered at the hospital before dawn for our father's surgery. The procedure would take at least 6 hours, the surgeon had explained, with another few hours in recovery before we could see him. We settled into the waiting room, my mother, Thomas, Melissa, and I, for the long vigil. As morning stretched into afternoon, our initial tense silence gradually gave way to conversation. My mother asked about my life in New York, showing genuine interest in the details of my apartment, my friends, my work. I asked about her volunteer activities at church, her book club, her garden. It was the longest, most authentic conversation we'd had in years, perhaps ever. The shadow of my father's surgery created a space where pretense seemed pointless, where old patterns could momentarily be set aside in favor of simple human connection. Late in the afternoon, the surgeon finally appeared in the waiting room. The procedure had been successful, though my father's recovery would be lengthy. He emphasized the need for significant lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, stress reduction, if another episode was to be avoided. That evening, when my father was finally settled in the ICU and briefly conscious, we were allowed to see him, one at a time. My mother went first, then Thomas. When my turn came, I found him groggy but alert. Surgery went well, I told him, though I knew the doctors had already explained everything. You're going to be okay. He nodded slightly. Need to ask you something important. I leaned closer to hear his weakened voice. The doctor says I need to make changes, big changes. Your mother and I, we don't know how to do this. Need help. What kind of help, Dad? Everything. Diet, exercise program, managing stress, all these new medications. He paused, clearly fatigued by even this brief speech. You're good at figuring things out, at thinking differently. Could use some of that now. The request, so direct, so humble from a man who had never asked for help with anything, moved me deeply. Of course, Dad, I can help you figure out a plan. Over the next week, as my father began his slow recovery, I extended my leave from visionary and committed to staying in Cincinnati until he was discharged and settled at home. Natasha was remarkably understanding, allowing me to handle some client work remotely while focusing primarily on my family situation. That week became a turning point in my relationship with my parents. As I researched cardiac rehabilitation programs, consulted with nutritionists, and set up systems to help my father manage his recovery, the dynamic between us shifted. For the first time, they were looking to me for guidance rather than attempting to impose their vision on my life. My mother, in particular, seemed to see me with new eyes as I confidently navigated medical terminology, created spreadsheets for medication tracking, and designed simple exercise routines approved by the cardiac team. You've become so capable, she remarked one evening as we sat in the hospital cafeteria during a brief break. I don't know how we would have managed all this without you. The acknowledgement felt healing, not because I needed their validation, but because it represented a new kind of relationship forming between us, one based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical authority. When my father was finally discharged after 10 days in the hospital, I helped transform their home environment to support his recovery. The process revealed how much they had been struggling even before the heart attack. The house showed signs of neglect, minor repairs left undone, clutter accumulating in unused rooms, the once immaculate garden overgrown. "Your father's had less energy for months," my mother explained when I asked about a broken porch step. "And I never learned to handle those sorts of things. We were going to hire someone, but—" She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "But what, Mom?" She hesitated, then admitted reluctantly. "Money's been tighter than we've let on. Your father's company has been downsizing. His position was eliminated last year. They kept him on as a consultant, but the pay is much less. We didn't want to worry you children." This revelation explained much about the state of the house, but raised new concerns. "Are you having financial difficulties? Beyond just home repairs?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We've been managing, cutting back where we can, using savings." She twisted her wedding ring anxiously. "But with these medical bills coming, now even with insurance, I'm not sure how we'll manage." The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents, who had pushed so hard for the safe traditional career path they believed would provide financial security, were now facing economic uncertainty in their 60s. Meanwhile, the daughter whose choices they had dismissed as impractical was thriving financially in her unstable creative career. Over the next 2 weeks, as I helped my parents adapt to their new post-heart attack reality, I began to see more clearly the financial strain they were under. Past due notices tucked into drawers, credit card statements with minimum payments circled, a calendar with bill due dates carefully noted, some with question marks beside them. My father's pride made it difficult to discuss directly, but as his strength gradually returned, I broached the subject carefully. "Dad, I noticed some past due notices while I was organizing the office. Are you and Mom having serious financial problems?" He stared out the window of their living room, where he now spent most of his days in a recliner. "Not how we planned our retirement," he finally said. "The company, my company for 30 years, they called it restructuring. Brought in younger people at half the salary." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. "Offered a consultation contract as a courtesy. Half pay, no benefits. Why didn't you tell us? Tell me?" He gave me a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. "After how we parted? After I told you that you'd come crawling back when your internet bubble burst?" He shook his head. "How could I tell you we were the ones facing financial collapse?" His honesty was startling. The Richard Chambers I'd grown up with would never have admitted such vulnerability, especially to the child whose life choices he had so thoroughly criticized. "Let me help," I said simply. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity, Dad. It's family." I took a deep breath. "You and Mom helped me when I was growing up. Now I can help you. That's how it's supposed to work." "We can't take your money, Alexis. We'll figure something out." "At least let me look at your finances," I countered. "Help you create a budget. Maybe negotiate with creditors. I'm good with this stuff. It's literally part of what I do professionally, analyzing data and creating strategic plans." After some resistance, he agreed to let me review their financial situation, though only to offer advice, not financial assistance. That night, at the dining room table, my mother brought out their financial records: bank statements, investment accounts, credit card bills, medical expenses, mortgage information. The picture that emerged was concerning. Between the reduced income from my father's consulting work, the accumulated medical bills, and years of living slightly beyond their means, they were facing approximately $87,000 in debt. Their retirement savings had been steadily depleted. The house still had a substantial mortgage, refinanced several times over the years to access equity for various expenses. "We should sell the house," my father said flatly when I presented my analysis. "Downsize to something we can afford outright, with what equity remains." My mother looked distressed at the suggestion. "This is our home, Richard. Where would we go? All our friends are here, our church, our community." I considered the options carefully. "Selling might become necessary, but let's explore other possibilities first. Dad can't handle a move right now anyway, not during cardiac rehabilitation." Over the next few days, I created a comprehensive financial recovery plan. I negotiated with medical providers to establish manageable payment plans. I contacted my father's former employer about extending his consulting contract with adjusted responsibilities that would accommodate his recovery. I researched refinancing options for the house that would lower their monthly payments. When I presented the plan, my parents were visibly relieved by the concrete steps and clear timeline. But my father remained resistant to one key element: my offer to clear their highest interest debts immediately. "Absolutely not," he insisted. "We got ourselves into this mess. We'll get ourselves out." "Dad, you're paying 24% interest on some of these credit cards. That's just throwing money away when I could help." "It's a matter of principle, Alexis." I recognized the stubborn pride that had defined so much of our relationship. But I also saw how that same trait had brought him to this crisis. Unable to acknowledge problems until they became catastrophic, unwilling to seek help until collapse was imminent. "Principles won't pay off predatory interest rates," I said firmly. "Let's make a deal. I'll pay off the 3 highest interest cards now, about $32,000 total. You can pay me back at 5% interest, which is still better than I'd get from most investments. We'll draw up a formal agreement with fixed monthly payments that fit within your budget." He opened his mouth to object, but I continued. "This isn't charity, Dad. It's a mutually beneficial financial arrangement. You get out from under crushing interest rates, I get a decent return on investment, and you maintain your independence by paying it back systematically." The framing, as a business arrangement rather than familial assistance, made it palatable to him. After consulting with my mother, who was clearly relieved by the solution, he agreed to my terms. That night, as I prepared to return to New York the next day, my mother came to the guest room where I was packing. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching me fold clothes with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said finally, "I used to worry so much about you, that you'd end up struggling because you chose such an unconventional path." I smiled slightly. "I know, Mom. I never imagined you'd be the one rescuing us." She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry we didn't support your choices. We were so certain we knew best." "You were trying to protect me," I acknowledged. "You wanted me to have security." "Yes, but we were measuring security by our standards, our generation's definition." She shook her head. "The world changed, and we didn't notice. You did." The conversation felt like the closing of a circle, not an end to our journey of reconciliation, but the completion of an important phase. My parents had finally seen me clearly, acknowledged the validity of my path, and accepted help from the very success they had once dismissed. As I flew back to New York the next day, I felt a profound sense of transformation. The crisis of my father's heart attack and their financial struggles had created an opening for a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than authority and obedience. I had left Cincinnati as the family disappointment. I was returning to New York as someone who had found the strength to forge her own path and the compassion to reach back when those who had once rejected her choices needed help. The painful break had been necessary for me to develop independently, to become fully myself. Now, with that authentic self firmly established, reconciliation became possible, not through compromise or surrender, but through mutual recognition of our shared humanity and interconnected lives. My phone buzzed with a text as the plane touched down at LaGuardia. It was from my father. "Thank you for everything. Proud of the woman you've become." 6 simple words that contained worlds of meaning. Not the validation I had once desperately sought, but an acknowledgement freely given from a place of genuine respect. Not the end of our story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one we would write together as equals. Returning to New York after those revelatory weeks in Cincinnati felt like stepping between parallel universes. My sleek Brooklyn apartment, with its minimalist furniture and city views, seemed to belong to a different person than the daughter who had just helped her parents navigate health crises and financial turmoil. For the first time, I was fully inhabiting both worlds, the ambitious digital media executive and the daughter with complicated family ties, without feeling torn apart by their contradictions. The financial arrangement I'd made with my parents was formalized before I left. My father, ever the businessman despite his circumstances, had insisted on proper documentation. We'd drawn up a simple promissory note with reasonable monthly payments scheduled over 5 years. The structure provided him dignity while addressing their immediate crisis, a balance I would never have thought to strike in my younger years. At Visionary, Natasha welcomed me back with genuine warmth and curiosity about my family situation. Over lunch in her office, I shared the basics of the reconciliation and my father's health status. "So the prodigal daughter returns and ends up saving the family that rejected her," she observed with a knowing smile. "Life does have a sense of irony." "I wouldn't call it saving them," I countered. "More like meeting them where they are, finding a way forward that honors both our needs." Natasha nodded approvingly. "That's growth, Alexis. Real growth. Not just professional success, but emotional intelligence." The next few months brought a new rhythm to my life. Weekly video calls with my parents became part of my routine. Sometimes brief check-ins, sometimes longer conversations about my father's recovery progress or their financial situation. My mother started texting me regularly, sending everything from updates on neighborhood happenings to questions about how to use their new tablet computer, purchased so we could video chat more easily. My father's recovery was steady but slower than he wanted. The forced inactivity of cardiac rehabilitation chafed against his natural drive, but the heart attack had sufficiently frightened him into compliance with medical directives. I found myself in the unexpected position of coaching my father, the man who had always been certain he knew best, on patience and acceptance of limitations. "I used to run the entire Northeast sales division," he complained during one video call, gesturing in frustration at the pedometer clipped to his shirt. "Now I'm celebrating if I hit 5,000 steps in a day." "Those 5,000 steps are keeping you alive to reach 10,000 next year," I reminded him. "Success looks different in different seasons, Dad." The phrase struck both of us simultaneously, its obvious parallel to our years-long conflict over my career choices hanging in the digital space between us. My father's expression shifted from frustration to thoughtful recognition. "Wisdom from my daughter," he said quietly. "I'm still getting used to that." Meanwhile, my professional life entered a new phase of expansion. Visionary was growing rapidly, acquiring smaller agencies and expanding its global footprint. My campaigns consistently delivered exceptional results, and senior leadership had taken notice. 3 months after returning from Cincinnati, I was called into a meeting. "With Cameron Phillips, the company's founder and CEO, we're opening a West Coast headquarters," he announced without preamble, his characteristic directness on full display. "Los Angeles. Entertainment industry focus, expanding into streaming and gaming markets. I want you to head it up." The offer was stunning. A significant promotion to executive creative director, a substantial salary increase, and the opportunity to build a division from the ground up. It was the kind of career leap that most people in my industry spent years positioning themselves for. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely curious. Cameron leaned back in his chair. 3 reasons. First, your work consistently outperforms benchmarks. You have technical and creative skills that combine perfectly for this digital era. Second, you think differently. You see angles and connections others miss. And third, he smiled slightly, you know how to stand your ground. Building a new office means fighting for resources, defending creative visions, and sometimes saying no to clients who want the safe option instead of the effective one. You've demonstrated that backbone repeatedly. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very qualities that had made me the difficult daughter were now the attributes being recognized as leadership strengths. My questioning nature, my resistance to following established paths simply because they were established, my willingness to challenge conventional thinking, these were now professional assets deserving of promotion rather than traits to be suppressed. It's a big move, I said thoughtfully. I'd need some time to consider. Of course, the rollout wouldn't begin for 3 months anyway. But don't take too long. If you're not interested, we need to look at external candidates. That evening, I sat on my small balcony overlooking the Brooklyn streetscape, considering the opportunity. Los Angeles represented another fresh start, a chance to build something significant with the full support of a major agency behind me. The role would involve not just creative direction, but strategic leadership, team building, and client relationship, management at the highest levels. Yet I found myself unexpectedly hesitant. The reconciliation with my family was still fresh, the new patterns of connection still forming. Moving across the country would complicate that process. And while career advancement had always been my primary focus, I'd begun to value the more balanced life I'd cultivated in New York. My friends, my volunteer work, the pottery studio where I'd become a regular. I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an extra session to talk through the decision. 5 years ago, I would have accepted immediately, I told her. It's everything I've worked for. And now? She prompted. Now I'm asking different questions. Not just, will this advance my career? But will this contribute to the life I actually want? Dr. Chen smiled. That's a profound shift in perspective, Alexis. What life do you actually want? The question stayed with me for days. What did I want beyond professional achievement? What would success look like if I defined it entirely for myself, without reference to my parents' expectations or my past? Rebellions against them? I made lists, created mind maps, journaled extensively, applying the same analytical skills I used for clients to my own life decisions. Gradually, a clearer picture emerged. I wanted creative fulfillment and professional growth, certainly. But I also wanted meaningful relationships, community connection, and the ability to use my skills to create positive change beyond corporate profit margins. Los Angeles offered tremendous career opportunity, but would require rebuilding my personal life from scratch. And something else nagged at me, a growing sense that my talents might be directed toward more meaningful impact than helping major brands sell more products, however creatively. After 2 weeks of deliberation, I requested another meeting with Cameron. I'm honored by the offer, I told him, but I'm going to decline the Los Angeles position. His eyebrows rose in surprise. That's unexpected. May I ask why? I've been reflecting on my long-term goals, both professionally and personally. While the LA opportunity is impressive, it's not aligned with the direction I'm hoping to move in. Which is? I took a deep breath. I'm increasingly interested in applying creative digital strategies to organizations focused on social impact. Nonprofits, educational institutions, sustainable businesses. I believe these sectors are underserved by top-tier digital talent, and there's tremendous opportunity to make a difference. Cameron studied me thoughtfully. This was a significant departure from Visionary's core business model, which centered on major corporate clients with substantial marketing budgets. You're talking about a completely different business division, he said finally. Yes, I acknowledged. one that might start small but could differentiate visionary in meaningful ways. Imagine the positive press of having a dedicated social impact arm. It would enhance recruitment efforts, potentially open new funding channels, and possibly even influence our corporate clients to allocate portions of their budgets to cause-related marketing. Cameron's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. He was, at heart, an entrepreneur who recognized opportunity in unconventional thinking. "Put together a proposal," he said finally. "Nothing elaborate, but outline what this division might look like, potential client categories, revenue models. If it makes business sense, we might consider a pilot program." 2 weeks later, I presented a comprehensive business plan for Visionary Impact, a specialized division focused on applying the agency's digital expertise to organizations driving positive social and environmental change. I'd researched potential clients, analyzed competitive landscape, developed revenue projections, and created case studies of similar initiatives within other major agencies. The leadership team was impressed, not just with the concept, but with the thoroughness of my approach. After extensive discussion and revision, Cameron approved a 1-year pilot program with a modest budget and small team. I would remain in New York, reporting directly to him while building this new venture alongside my existing client responsibilities. It was neither the promotion to Los Angeles nor a continuation of my current path, but something entirely new. A direction I had created by honoring both my professional skills and my evolving personal values. For the first time in my career, I wasn't driven primarily by advancement or achievement for its own sake, but by the alignment of my work with deeper purpose. The next several months were intensely demanding as I balanced my existing client load with the development of Visionary Impact. I built a small team of like-minded colleagues who were equally excited about applying their talents to mission-driven organizations. We started with 3 pilot clients: an environmental nonprofit focused on ocean conservation, a community development financial institution providing microloans to underserved entrepreneurs, and a progressive university launching an innovative online education platform. The work was challenging in new ways. These organizations had smaller budgets and often less digital sophistication than our corporate clients, but their passion and commitment were unmatched. We had to be more creative, more efficient, and more innovative, delivering maximum impact with limited resources. I shared updates on this new venture during my weekly calls with my parents. To my surprise, my father showed genuine interest in the concept. "So, you're helping these organizations use technology to further their missions?" he asked, seeking to understand. "Like a consultant?" "More like a strategic partner," I explained. "We're not just advising them, we're implementing customized digital solutions, creating campaigns, building platforms. But yes, it's about advancing their impact through technology and creative communication." "Interesting," he mused. "I always saw business and charity as separate worlds, but you're creating something in between." "The lines are blurring everywhere, Dad. More businesses are incorporating social responsibility into their core models. More nonprofits are adopting business principles for sustainability. I believe that's where the future lies, in integration rather than separation." My mother, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "You sound so passionate about this, Alexis. More than when you talk." "About your regular clients." Her observation was accurate. The energy I felt working with these mission-driven organizations was different. A deeper sense of purpose beyond professional pride or creative satisfaction. 6 months into the pilot program, we had our first major success story. The ocean. Conservation nonprofit launched a digital campaign we'd created that went viral, increasing their annual donations by 320% and attracting corporate sponsorship offers. The case study we developed around this success opened doors to conversations with larger potential clients in the impact space. Cameron was impressed with the results and the positive press Visionary received. "You might be onto something here," he acknowledged during our quarterly review. The profit margins are thinner than our traditional business, but the goodwill and differentiation value is significant. By the end of the one-year pilot, Visionary Impact had grown to a team of 8, serving 11 clients across environmental, educational, and social justice sectors. Our work had won several industry awards for innovation and effectiveness. Most importantly, we demonstrated a sustainable business model that allowed for both meaningful impact and reasonable profitability. Cameron approved the division's permanent establishment with expanded budget and headcount. My role was formalized as Executive Director of Visionary Impact, with a seat on the agency's leadership team. It was a professional triumph unlike any I'd experienced before, not because of the title or compensation, but because I'd created something that aligned my skills with my values, my ambition with my ethics. I'd found a way to succeed on my own terms, defined not in opposition to my parents' expectations, but in authentic alignment with my evolving sense of purpose. Around this same time, my father reached a significant milestone in his recovery. 1 year post-heart attack, with dramatically improved health markers. His cardiologist cleared him for more normal activity levels, though with continued monitoring and lifestyle management. The financial plan we'd established was working well too. Through careful budgeting and the payment arrangement we'd created, my parents had reduced their overall debt by nearly a third. To celebrate these achievements, I suggested visiting Cincinnati for a long weekend. It would be my first time back since helping them through the immediate crisis the previous year. Though we'd maintained regular communication through calls and video chats, I felt ready to re-engage with them in person to continue building our new relationship face-to-face. The visit was markedly different from my previous experiences returning home. Free from the tension of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments, we could interact as adults with mutual respect. My father showed genuine interest in my work, with Visionary Impact, asking insightful questions about business models and growth strategies. My mother shared more openly about her own interests and concerns, no longer filtering everything through the lens of maternal advice-giving. On my second evening there, my father asked if I would join him for a walk around the neighborhood, a daily ritual that had become central to his recovery regimen. As we moved at his careful pace through familiar streets, he brought up a subject I hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about what you said months ago, about success looking different in different seasons," he began. "It's made me reconsider a lot of things, including how I've defined success throughout my life." "How so?" I asked, curious about this reflective side of him I'd rarely seen. "I spent decades chasing a very specific version of achievement: corporate advancement, financial accumulation, status symbols." He gestured toward a neighbor's house with its luxury cars in the driveway. I measured my worth by those metrics and expected everyone around me, including you kids, to value the same things. I nodded, watching him struggle slightly on a small incline, his pace slowing further. "The heart attack was humbling," he continued. "Suddenly, success meant making it up a flight of stairs without chest pain. It meant reaching a target heart rate during rehab, small victories that would have seemed meaningless to my former self." We paused at a park bench, and he sat down, catching his breath. I realized I've been asking the wrong questions all along. Not, "How far can I climb?" or "How much can I accumulate?" but "What truly matters?" and "What kind of legacy am I creating?" The depth of his reflection surprised me. "That's profound, Dad. Not everyone reaches that insight, even after a health crisis." "Well, I had some help," he admitted with a small smile. "Watching you build something meaningful on your own terms has been educational. You found a way to combine professional success with personal values. I'm still learning what that might look like for me." The conversation marked another milestone in our evolving relationship, my father not just accepting my different path, but actually learning from it, finding value in the very choices he had once condemned. Back in New York, energized by both personal and professional progress, I continued building visionary impact with growing confidence. Our client roster expanded to include larger organizations with more substantial budgets, allowing us to tackle more ambitious projects. I assembled a diverse team of specialists who shared the vision of applying cutting-edge digital strategies to purpose-driven work. As our reputation grew, I began receiving speaking invitations, industry conferences, university programs, even a TEDx event focused on the intersection of technology and social change. Public speaking had never been my favorite activity, but I recognized the opportunity to amplify our message and potentially influence the broader digital marketing industry toward more meaningful applications of their talents. My first major presentation, at a digital innovation conference in Chicago, received unexpected attention when a clip went viral on professional social networks. In the video, I challenged the conventional wisdom that purpose-driven work necessarily meant sacrificing quality, innovation, or financial viability. The question isn't whether we can afford to apply our best talents to solving real problems, I argued in the clip that circulated widely. The question is whether we can afford not to. The next generation of consumers and employees aren't just asking if your product works or if your company pays well. They're asking what you stand for, what you contribute, how you make the world better through your existence. Organizations that can't answer those questions convincingly will find themselves increasingly irrelevant. The response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with messages from industry colleagues, potential clients, and young professionals seeking mentorship. Visionary received inquiries from major corporations interested in developing more authentic corporate social responsibility initiatives. Several talented creatives and strategists approached us about joining the team, often willing to take modest pay cuts to work on more meaningful projects. In this whirlwind of professional growth and recognition, I received an unexpected email from Thomas. "Have you seen this? Thought you might want to know." Attached was a link to a community newspaper article about Cincinnati's Top 50 Over 50. Local residents making significant contributions after the age of 50. There, listed at number 37, was Richard Chambers, highlighted for launching a financial literacy program for high school students. I clicked through to the full article in shock. According to the brief profile, my father had developed a curriculum that taught practical money management skills to teenagers, focusing particularly on schools in lower-income neighborhoods. He'd started as a volunteer presenter at his old company's Community Outreach Day, then expanded to a regular program at 3 local high schools. The article quoted him directly. "After decades in corporate finance, followed by personal health and financial challenges, I realized I had valuable knowledge that could help young people avoid common pitfalls. Success isn't just about earning money, it's about managing it wisely, understanding its role in your life, and using it as a tool rather than being controlled by it." I called my mother immediately. "Why didn't you tell me about Dad's financial literacy program?" "I just saw the article Thomas sent." She chuckled. "He wanted to wait until he had something substantial to show for it. You know your father, never one to discuss works in progress." "But this is amazing. How long has he been doing this?" "It started about 4 months ago, very small scale. But he's become quite passionate about it. The schools have been requesting more sessions, and he's training other retirees to expand the program." The image of my father, the same man who had once dismissed my career choices as impractical, now volunteering his time to teach financial skills in underserved schools, left me momentarily speechless. It represented such a fundamental shift in his values, his sense of purpose, his definition of meaningful contribution. When we spoke on our next video call, I congratulated him on the recognition. He seemed simultaneously proud and embarrassed by the attention. "It's nothing fancy," he insisted. Just basic financial concepts that these kids should be learning but aren't. How credit works. The true cost of debt. How to budget. Simple investment principles. Don't downplay it, Dad. You're making a real difference. Those skills can change trajectories, especially for kids who don't have financial role models at home. He nodded thoughtfully. That's what keeps me going back, seeing the light bulbs go on when they grasp a concept. Many of these students are incredibly bright. They just haven't been exposed to this information. So you've become a teacher in your retirement, I observed with a smile. Not exactly the corporate consulting you'd planned. Life takes unexpected turns, he replied, echoing words I'd said to him during his recovery. Success looks different in different seasons. Hearing him repeat my phrase back to me with genuine understanding felt like the closing of a circle. We had each, in our own ways, redefined success according to deeper values than external achievement or financial accumulation. We had found purpose beyond position or status, and somehow, through all the conflict and reconciliation, we had influenced each other toward these more meaningful definitions. As visionary impact continued to grow, I found myself increasingly drawn to the educational aspects of our work, training clients to better understand digital strategies, mentoring younger team members, developing frameworks that could be widely shared. I began writing articles for industry publications and working on an outline for a potential book about purpose-driven digital transformation. This evolution in my professional interests led to an unexpected opportunity when one of our clients, Burton College, approached me about developing and teaching a graduate course on digital strategies for social impact. The position would be part-time, allowing me to maintain my leadership role at Visionary while exploring this new dimension of sharing knowledge and shaping future professionals. The synchronicity was striking, my father finding renewal through teaching while I simultaneously moved toward educational work. Despite our different fields and approaches, we had arrived at complementary understandings about the importance of passing knowledge to others, of contributing to something larger than our individual success. During our weekly call, I shared the teaching opportunity with my parents. My father's immediate enthusiasm touched me deeply. "You'd be excellent at that," he said with conviction. "You have a natural ability to make complex concepts accessible. I've seen it in your presentations online." "You've watched my presentations?" This was news to me. My mother laughed. "Of course we have. Your father has seen that TEDx talk at least 3 times. He even took notes." The image of my father, once so dismissive of my digital career, taking notes on my professional insights was almost too perfect, the transformation too complete to seem real. Yet it was real, as was my own evolution from rebellious daughter to secure professional to mentor and educator. That evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, from the painful rupture of, "You're a disappointment to this family," to this moment of mutual respect and genuine admiration. The path had been neither straight nor easy. It had required separation for authentic identity to form, crisis to create opening for reconciliation, and willingness on both sides to see beyond established patterns. Most importantly, it had required each of us to define success for ourselves, not in opposition to others' expectations, not as a reaction to past wounds, but in authentic alignment with our deepest values and unique contributions. As I prepared materials for my first college lecture, I couldn't help but smile at the parallel journeys my father and I were now on, both teaching, both sharing knowledge, both finding meaning beyond the narrower definitions of success that had once divided us. The title of my lecture series seemed fitting not just for my students, but for the longer, more personal journey I'd traveled. Redefining Success: Digital Strategies for Meaningful Impact. Teaching at Burton College opened an unexpected new dimension in my professional life. Standing before eager graduate students, many just a few years younger than me, discussing digital strategies for social impact felt like a natural extension of my work at Visionary Impact. The questions they asked, their fresh perspectives on familiar challenges, their idealism tempered with practical ambition, all of it energized me in ways I hadn't anticipated. My first semester consisted of 8 evening sessions spread across 4 months, a schedule that allowed me to maintain my leadership responsibilities at Visionary while exploring this new role. I approached the curriculum development with the same strategic thoroughness I applied to client campaigns, creating a framework that balanced theoretical foundations with practical application. What I hadn't expected was how teaching would reshape my own thinking. Explaining concepts I'd internalized through years of practice forced me to articulate underlying principles, to question assumptions, to consider alternative approaches. The students' diverse backgrounds, from nonprofit management to public health to environmental science, brought perspectives that challenged the digital marketing orthodoxies I'd absorbed. You've mentioned several times that engagement metrics are crucial indicators of campaign success, one student, Elena, observed during our third session. But in public health communication, sometimes the most important outcomes aren't measurable through clicks or shares. How do we balance digital metrics with real-world impact that might not be immediately quantifiable? It was an excellent question that pushed beyond conventional digital marketing frameworks. We spent the remainder of that session exploring alternative evaluation models, considering how digital strategies might be assessed through longitudinal health outcomes, behavior change indicators, and community-level transformations. The discussion continued beyond class hours, with several students lingering to share experiences from their respective fields. These conversations began influencing my approach at Visionary Impact. I initiated a research project examining long-term outcome measurement for purpose-driven campaigns, moving beyond immediate engagement metrics to develop more sophisticated impact assessment models. Our client organizations responded enthusiastically to this evolution, recognizing the alignment with their own goals of creating meaningful, lasting change rather than merely generating attention. As my first teaching semester progressed, I found myself allocating more time to educational preparation than I'd initially planned. What had begun as a modest side commitment was increasingly capturing my imagination and energy. I started collecting case studies for potential publication, recording guest lectures with industry colleagues for future courses, and sketching outlines for a comprehensive textbook on digital strategies for social impact, a resource I wished had existed when I was studying. My growing passion for this educational work became evident during weekly calls with my parents. I found myself sharing classroom anecdotes, describing student projects, discussing pedagogical approaches I was exploring. My enthusiasm must have been apparent. "You light up when you talk about teaching," my mother observed during one such conversation. "It reminds me of how you were as a child when you discovered something new, that same intensity and wonder." My father nodded in agreement. There's something special about sharing knowledge, isn't there? Seeing that moment when a concept clicks for someone. It's addictive in the best possible way. His understanding reflected his own experience with the financial literacy program, which had continued to expand. What had begun as occasional presentations at 3 schools had grown into a structured curriculum implemented across the Cincinnati public school district. He'd recruited and trained a team of retired financial professionals as volunteer instructors, created partnerships with local credit unions to provide practical learning opportunities for students, and secured modest grant funding to support materials development. "We're focusing on practical application now," he explained during one of our calls. Setting up mock banking systems within the schools, having students create personal budgets based on career research, exploring entrepreneurship through micro-business projects. The pride in his voice when discussing these developments was unmistakable. Not the defensive pride I'd witnessed in his corporate days, but something deeper and more authentic. He had found purpose beyond status, impact beyond income. As my teaching semester concluded, The department chair at Burton invited me to dinner. Patricia Winters was an established scholar in nonprofit management who had championed bringing industry practitioners like me into the academic program. "Your course evaluations were exceptional," she told me as we settled into a quiet table at a restaurant near campus. "Students particularly appreciated the real-world applications and your ability to bridge technical digital concepts with broader social impact goals." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely pleased by the feedback. "I've enjoyed it tremendously, more than I anticipated, honestly." "That's apparent," she smiled. "Which brings me to a proposition I'd like you to consider. We're developing a new concentration within our graduate program focused specifically on digital transformation for impact organizations. We'd like you to help design it and potentially direct the concentration, with a formal position as an executive professor." The offer was unexpected and immediately intriguing. "That sounds fascinating, but it would require a significant time commitment. I'm still leading Visionary Impact." "We understand that," Patricia nodded. "We're envisioning a half-time arrangement initially, teaching 2 courses per semester, curriculum development, and student advisement. The position would include collaborating with organizations in our network on applied projects, which could potentially align with your agency work." She slid a formal letter across the table outlining the position details, including compensation that was surprisingly competitive with industry standards, considering the reduced hours. "Take some time to think about it," she advised. "This would be a significant shift, but based on what I've observed, it might align well with your evolving interests." Over the next several weeks, I carefully evaluated the opportunity, discussing it with Natasha and Cameron at Visionary, consulting with my therapist, Dr. Chen, and seeking advice from colleagues who had successfully bridged academic and industry roles. The prospect of dividing my professional focus between Visionary Impact and Burton College was both exciting and daunting. Each role offered distinct forms of fulfillment: the fast-paced innovation and measurable results of agency work, balanced against the reflective depth and developmental impact of teaching. The question wasn't which to choose, but whether I could effectively integrate both into a cohesive professional identity. During my deliberations, I received an unexpected email from my father. The subject line read simply, "Perspective on your decision. Your mother mentioned you're considering a teaching position alongside your agency work," he wrote. "I hope you don't mind my offering some thoughts, given my own recent experience with teaching." His message continued with remarkable insight. "Throughout my corporate career, I measured success by accomplishments that were ultimately ephemeral: quarterly results, annual bonuses, fleeting recognition. What I've found through teaching these young people is something far more enduring: the transmission of knowledge that will outlast any campaign or promotion or title." He concluded, "Whatever you decide, remember that legacy isn't built through position, but through impact. You've already demonstrated remarkable professional skill. Perhaps now is the time to consider how that skill might be multiplied through others." The wisdom and generosity of his perspective moved me deeply. This wasn't the father who had dismissed my career choices or insisted on a narrow definition of success. This was a man who had experienced profound transformation, who had faced mortality, overcome pride, discovered new purpose, and was now sharing hard-earned wisdom without imposition or expectation. After thorough consideration, I proposed a hybrid arrangement to both Visionary and Burton College. I would transition to a strategic advisor role at the agency, maintaining oversight of key client relationships and organizational direction while reducing my day-to-day operational responsibilities. This would allow me to accept a half-time executive professor position at Burton, focusing on developing the new digital transformation concentration. Both organizations responded positively to the proposal. Cameron recognized the potential benefits to Visionary's reputation and recruitment efforts through my academic affiliation, while Patricia appreciated the ongoing industry connection I would maintain. The transition wasn't without challenges. Restructuring my role at Visionary required careful succession planning for day-to-day leadership. Some clients expressed concern about reduced access to my direct involvement. My high-performing team needed reassurance about continued strategic direction and growth opportunities. Yet these challenges proved navigable with thoughtful planning and transparent communication. I identified and mentored my successor for operational leadership at Visionary Impact, introduced her systematically to key clients, and developed a structured advisory schedule that maintained strategic continuity while creating space for my academic responsibilities. By the following semester, I had settled into a new rhythm, 3 days weekly at Visionary, 2 at Burton, with flexibility to adjust as specific projects demanded. The blend proved more synergistic than I had dared hope. My continued industry involvement kept my teaching grounded in current practices and emerging trends, while the academic environment provided space for deeper research and conceptual development that ultimately benefited our agency clients. This integration of roles reflected a broader integration I was experiencing, a sense of wholeness that embraced my analytical skills and creative talents, my drive for excellence, and my desire for meaningful impact, my professional ambitions, and personal values. The fragmentation I had felt in my younger years, the sense of being torn between expectations and authenticity, had resolved into coherence. About 6 months into this new arrangement, I received another unexpected opportunity. A publisher who had attended one of my guest lectures at an industry conference approached me about writing a book based on the frameworks I'd developed for digital transformation in purpose-driven organizations. "There's a significant gap in the literature," the acquisition editor explained during our initial call. "Plenty of books on digital marketing, plenty on social impact, but very few that effectively bridge those worlds with practical strategies and measurable approaches." The timing felt serendipitous. Through my teaching and client work, I had been systematically developing precisely such frameworks, approaches that applied sophisticated digital strategies to purpose-driven work without sacrificing either effectiveness or ethical integrity. The potential book would provide a vehicle to share these methodologies more broadly, potentially influencing the field beyond my direct reach through teaching or client engagements. I began drafting an outline and sample chapters during early morning writing sessions before my regular workday began. The discipline required was substantial, but the process proved unexpectedly energizing, a chance to synthesize years of practical experience, research insights, and teaching discoveries into a coherent methodology. As I developed the manuscript, I found myself frequently reflecting on the parallels between my journey and the transformation processes I was describing for organizations. Both required honest assessment of current reality, clarity about core values and purpose, willingness to challenge established patterns, and courage to pursue authentic alignment even when the path wasn't clearly marked. These reflections made their way into the book's introduction, where I shared glimpses of my personal and professional evolution as context for the frameworks I was presenting. The publisher responded enthusiastically to these elements, encouraging me to weave personal narrative throughout the more technical content, creating a book that was simultaneously practical guide and inspirational journey. During this intensive writing period, my regular visits to Cincinnati became important anchors. The relationship with my parents had continued strengthening, evolving from tentative reconciliation to genuine friendship and mutual respect. My father's financial literacy program had received regional recognition, expanding to neighboring school districts through partnerships with the state education department. My mother had discovered new purpose through volunteer work with a literacy program for immigrant families, applying her organizational skills and warm interpersonal approach to community building. Witnessing their reinvention in their 60s, finding meaningful contribution beyond traditional retirement expectations, inspired me. They had moved from defining success through status and accumulation to measuring it through impact and legacy. The transformation mirrored my own journey from achievement-oriented ambition to purpose-driven contribution. During one visit home, my father invited me to observe one of his advanced financial literacy sessions at a local high school. The classroom was packed with teenagers who, contrary to stereotype, were thoroughly engaged with his presentation on entrepreneurship principles. The mutual respect between my father and these students was immediately apparent. He spoke to them as capable future leaders rather than kids to be managed, and they responded with genuine interest and thoughtful questions. Watching him in this environment, animated, patient, simultaneously teaching and learning, I was struck by how different he seemed from the rigid, status-conscious father of my youth. The heart attack and financial crisis had broken something open in him, creating space for authentic reinvention and deeper connection. After the session, several students approached him with follow-up questions or to share ideas for their project-based assignments. He engaged with each one individually, offering encouragement and specific guidance without imposing his perspective. When the last student departed, he turned to me with a questioning look. "What did you think?" "I think you've found your calling," I replied honestly. "They respect you, but more importantly, they feel respected by you. That's rare and valuable." He nodded thoughtfully as we walked toward the parking lot. I keep thinking about all those years in corporate finance, the endless meetings, the political maneuvering, the focus on quarterly numbers. It felt so important then, but looking back, he shook his head. Most of it feels irrelevant now. But this, helping these young people understand financial systems, teaching them to make informed choices, watching them develop confidence, with concepts that intimidated me at their age, this feels consequential. "It is," I assured him. "You're giving them tools that will shape their entire relationship with money and work and value. That's a profound gift." "Funny how life works," he mused as we reached his car. "I spent decades trying to accumulate credentials and titles, and now the work that means most to me comes with no official position or compensation." He paused, then added, "I understand your choices better now, Alexis. Why traditional success? Metrics weren't sufficient for you. Why you questioned the paths we presented as inevitable." His words represented a completion of sorts, full acknowledgement of the validity of my early resistance to conventional definitions of achievement. Not that I needed this validation anymore, but there was healing in having it offered freely. An affirmation of mutual understanding across our different journeys. That evening, as we sat on my parents' back porch after dinner, my mother broached a subject they had been hesitant to discuss since the initial financial crisis. "We have some news," she began, exchanging glances with my father. "We've decided to sell the house." The announcement surprised me, given how adamant they had been about staying in their longtime home during the aftermath of my father's heart attack. "The mortgage is still substantial," my father explained, "and maintaining the property requires more effort and expense than makes sense for just the two of us now. We've found a smaller home in a community closer to downtown, walking distance, to shops and restaurants, lower maintenance requirements, and a significantly reduced monthly payment. It's a lovely townhouse," my mother added. "With a small garden I can manage easily, and the equity from this house will allow us to clear the remaining debt we owe you, with some left over to create a modest emergency fund." The practicality of their decision reflected significant growth, a willingness to adapt to changing circumstances rather than clinging to status symbols or familiar patterns. They were choosing financial health and simplified living over maintaining appearances, or preserving the family home for sentimental reasons. "That sounds like a wise decision," I told them sincerely. "The financial peace of mind alone would make it worthwhile." "There's something else," my father continued. "We want to establish a small foundation with some of the proceeds. Nothing elaborate, just a structured way to support the financial literacy program's expansion. Create an entity that can accept donations, provide modest stipends for instructors expanding to new schools, develop and distribute materials. The vision reflected how deeply committed he had become to this work, not as a retirement hobby, but as a meaningful legacy. He was thinking beyond his personal involvement to create sustainable impact. I could help with that, I offered. Setting up the structure, creating digital infrastructure, developing a simple but effective brand presence. It's exactly the kind of project Visionary Impact specializes in. We were hoping you might say that, my mother smiled. We'd want to compensate your team properly, of course. Consider it my contribution to the foundation, I replied, a way to support work I believe in. The conversation shifted to practical planning, timeline for the house sale, structure for the foundation, digital resources needed for program expansion. The ease with which we discussed these matters, financial, practical, aspirational, reflected how completely our relationship had transformed. No power struggles, no unspoken judgments, no competing definitions of success or value, just three adults collaborating on meaningful projects aligned with shared values. Back in New York, energized by this evolving family connection and the progress on my book manuscript, I continued developing both my academic and agency work with renewed clarity. The integration of these professional dimensions felt increasingly natural, the reflective space of academic exploration informing the practical application of client projects, the immediate feedback of industry work, grounding theoretical development in tangible outcomes. My book manuscript progressed steadily, the publisher's early feedback enthusiastic about both the practical frameworks and the personal narrative elements. The working title, Digital with Purpose, Transforming Organizations for Meaningful Impact, captured the central thesis that technological tools were most powerful when deployed in service of authentic mission rather than as ends in themselves. As the completion of the manuscript approached, coinciding with the one-year anniversary of my hybrid role arrangement, I received a call from Cameron Phillips that would present yet another unexpected direction. The board and I have been discussing Visionary's long-term strategic development, he began without preamble, his characteristic directness apparent even over the phone. The success of Visionary Impact has demonstrated significant potential for purpose-driven digital transformation. As a core business focus, not just a specialized division. I listened with interest, unsure where this was heading. We're considering a substantial pivot, repositioning Visionary as the premier agency for organizations driving positive change, from nonprofits to B Corp to impact-focused divisions within traditional corporations. Your division would essentially become our primary business model, with traditional corporate marketing as a secondary focus rather than the reverse. The potential shift was dramatic, transforming a conventional digital agency into a purpose-centered organization. The implications for staffing, client relationships, revenue models, and organizational culture would be far-reaching. That's a significant strategic evolution, I observed. What prompted this consideration? Multiple factors, Cameron replied. Industry differentiation in an increasingly crowded agency landscape, recruitment advantages in attracting top talent who want meaningful work, growing market demand as more organizations prioritize purpose alongside profit. And frankly, the financial performance of your division has demonstrated that purpose-driven work can be economically viable when approached with the right frameworks and expectations. He continued, We'd like you to lead the development of this strategic pivot, not day-to-day implementation. Your academic role remains valuable to us for industry positioning, but the conceptual architecture and transition planning. Essentially, scaling what you've built with Visionary Impact across the entire organization. The proposal represented an extraordinary opportunity to influence an established agency's evolution toward greater purpose alignment, potentially creating ripple effects throughout the industry as competitors observed the shift. It was also a remarkable validation of the approach I'd championed, often against significant skepticism about its viability and scale potential. I'd need to understand more about the board's commitment level and timeline expectations, I responded. This kind of transformation requires deep alignment from leadership through implementation teams. It's not just a repositioning exercise, but a fundamental identity shift. Completely agree, Cameron said. The board is prepared for a multi-year process with appropriate resource allocation. We'd like you to develop a comprehensive transformation roadmap, including philosophical foundations, operational implications, and implementation phases. After our call, I sat at my desk overlooking the Brooklyn streetscape, contemplating this unexpected development. What had begun as a modest pilot program, a small team applying digital expertise to purpose-driven organizations, had demonstrated sufficient success to potentially reshape an entire agency's direction. The vision I had championed was proving not just morally compelling, but commercially viable at scale. The significance wasn't lost on me. This wasn't just professional validation, but affirmation of the underlying values that had driven my initial rebellion against conventional paths. The questioning nature my parents had once found so problematic had become a catalytic force for organizational transformation. The resistance to established norms that had made me the difficult daughter was now recognized as necessary for meaningful innovation. That evening, I called my parents to share the news about Visionary's potential, strategic pivot, and my role in shaping it. Their genuine excitement and understanding of its significance touched me deeply. It's not just a career achievement, my father observed. It's validation of your entire approach to professional contribution. That meaningful impact and business. Success aren't opposing forces, but can be mutually reinforcing when aligned correctly. My mother added, I remember how frustrated we were by your constant questioning, always wanting to understand why things were done certain ways, never satisfied with, that's just how it's done. Now I see that impulse as your greatest strength. You've never accepted artificial limitations or false dichotomies. Their perspective reflected how completely our relationship had transformed, from parents who had once seen my questioning nature as problematic rebellion to adults who recognized it as principled discernment, from a family that had rejected me as a disappointment to a supportive community celebrating my unique contribution. As I contemplated this latest opportunity, helping transform an established organization toward greater purpose alignment, I realized it represented the integration of everything my journey had taught me. The courage to question established norms, the persistence to demonstrate alternative approaches, the strategic thinking to create viable transition paths, the communication, skills to bring others along on transformative journeys. What once had been viewed as rejection of tradition had evolved into creation of new traditions. What had begun as rebellion against limiting definitions had become expansion of possibility for others. The path that had once separated me from my family had ultimately created new common ground based on deeper values and authentic purpose. The daughter who had been kicked out for being a disappointment had found her own definition of success, one based not on external validation or predetermined paths, but on authentic contribution and purposeful impact. When her parents later sought her help with debts, they found not just financial assistance, but a model for meaningful reinvention in life's later chapters. The circle had closed, not through compromise or surrender of authentic self, but through mutual growth toward shared values expressed through different paths. The reconciliation wasn't about returning to old patterns, but about creating new connections based on respect for each person's unique journey and contribution. As I ended the call with my parents and returned to work on my book manuscript, I felt a profound sense of integration, of past and present, of professional achievement and personal values, of individual fulfillment and collective contribution. The journey from rejection to reconciliation had transformed not just our family relationships, but our individual definitions of purpose, success, and meaningful legacy. The disappointment had become the catalyst. The separation had enabled authentic growth. The crisis had created opening for new connection. The personal transformation had sparked organizational innovation. And the full circle moment had revealed that sometimes, the paths we're warned against are precisely the journeys we most need to take. Not to prove others wrong, but to discover our unique contribution to a world hungry for authentic purpose and meaningful change. The strategic pivot at Visionary became my central professional focus over the next several months. Transforming an established agency with traditional corporate clients into a purpose-centered organization required both conceptual clarity and practical roadmaps. I assembled a cross-functional team of strategists, creatives, and operational leaders to develop a comprehensive transformation plan, breaking the process into manageable phases with clear objectives and metrics. The work was complex and demanding, requiring careful balancing of commercial viability with authentic purpose, alignment. We needed frameworks for evaluating potential clients against impact criteria, processes for reorienting existing client relationships, staffing models that valued purpose expertise alongside technical skills, and measurement approaches that captured meaningful impact beyond conventional performance metrics. Throughout this intensive planning period, I maintained my teaching responsibilities at Burton College, finding that the academic environment provided valuable space for deeper examination of the principles guiding Visionary's transformation. My graduate students became thoughtful sounding boards, raising important questions and considerations from their diverse professional backgrounds. How will you address the inevitable tension between financial goals and impact priorities when they conflict? Asked Marcus, a mid-career professional transitioning from corporate finance to nonprofit leadership. Even with the best intentions, those pressure points will emerge. His question led to robust classroom discussion about decision frameworks for navigating such tensions, discussions that directly informed the governance models we were developing for Visionary's transformation. The academic context allowed for exploration of nuanced scenarios without the immediate pressure of implementation, creating space for deeper thinking that ultimately strengthened our approach. The manuscript for my book progressed alongside these professional developments, the three streams of work: Visionary's transformation, my teaching role, and the book project, informing and enriching each other in unexpected ways. Concepts developed for the agency's strategic pivot became case studies in the manuscript. Classroom discussions generated frameworks that informed both the book and the transformation strategy. The book's central thesis about purpose-driven digital transformation provided philosophical grounding for the agency's strategic direction. This integration of professional dimensions reflected the personal integration I had achieved, no longer compartmentalizing different aspects of my identity, but experiencing them as complementary expressions of core values and purpose. The fragmentation I had felt in my younger years, torn between external expectations and authentic calling, had resolved into coherence. After 4 months of intensive development, we presented the comprehensive transformation plan to Visionary's board. The strategy outlined a 3-year process for repositioning the agency, beginning with internal culture transformation and capability building, progressing through client portfolio evolution, and culminating in full market repositioning as the premier digital partner for purpose-driven organizations. "This is more thorough and thoughtful than I anticipated," Cameron acknowledged after the presentation, the board members nodding in agreement. "Most importantly, it acknowledges both the challenges and opportunities with equal clarity. We're not approaching this with naive idealism, but with strategic optimism." The board approved the plan with minor modifications, allocating substantial resources for the first phase of implementation. While I would maintain strategic oversight of the transformation, we appointed a dedicated implementation leader to manage day-to-day execution, allowing me to continue my balanced role between Visionary and Burton College. With the transformation plan approved and initial implementation underway, I was able to refocus attention on completing my book manuscript. The publisher had set an ambitious timeline, aiming for release to coincide with a major industry conference where I had been invited to deliver a keynote address. A perfect platform for introducing the book's core concepts to key audience segments. Writing the final chapters proved unexpectedly emotional. As I articulated the principles and frameworks I had developed through years of practice and refinement, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led to these insights, the early rebellion against conventional paths, the painful break with family expectations, the professional exploration that had revealed deeper purpose, the reconciliation built on mutual growth and respect. These personal elements became the connective tissue of the manuscript, transforming what might have been a conventional professional text into a more resonant narrative about purpose-driven transformation, both organizational and personal. The editor encouraged this direction, recognizing that the integration of professional frameworks with authentic personal journey created a distinctive, compelling approach. The personal narrative doesn't dilute the practical content. It strengthens it, she observed in her feedback on the final draft. Readers understand that these frameworks emerged from lived experience and tested application, not just theoretical constructs. As the book moved into production, my parents' plans for downsizing and establishing their foundation were progressing simultaneously. They had accepted an offer on their longtime home and purchased the downtown townhouse my mother had described, a decision that represented significant practical and psychological adaptation for two people who had once defined success through traditional suburban homeownership. I flew to Cincinnati for a long weekend to help with the transition, arriving to find their home of 30 years in the chaotic midst of packing and sorting. Boxes filled the living room, labeled for various destinations: new home, donation, children's storage. My mother moved through the chaos with surprising equanimity, making decisions about possessions that once would have carried significant emotional weight. "It's just stuff," she said simply when I commented on her composure. The heart attack changed our perspective on so many things. What matters is that we're creating a lifestyle that works better for us now, more walkable, more connected to community, less focused on maintaining property, and more on meaningful activities. My father was equally philosophical about the downsizing process, though I noticed he became more sentimental when sorting through certain items: photographs, my grandfather's woodworking tools, books that had influenced his thinking at various life stages. "I'm keeping the essentials," he explained as we categorized contents of his home office. "Things that either serve a practical purpose or carry genuine meaning. The rest is just accumulation." This discernment about what constituted essential versus accumulation represented remarkable growth for a man who had once measured status through possessions and professional position. He was distinguishing between items with authentic value and those maintained merely for appearance or habit, a distinction that paralleled his evolving definition of meaningful contribution beyond title or compensation. While helping sort family photographs, I discovered a box of memorabilia specifically labeled with my name. Inside were artifacts from throughout my life: art projects from elementary school, certificates and awards from middle and high school, newspaper clippings about design competitions I'd won in college, printouts of articles mentioning my professional achievements in recent years. "Your mother kept everything," my father said, watching me examine these preserved fragments of my journey. "Even during the years when things were difficult between us, she never stopped being proud of you, never stopped believing you would find your way, even if it wasn't the path we had envisioned." The collection revealed a parallel narrative to the one I had experienced. While I had felt rejection and disappointment from my parents, my mother had been quietly documenting my successes, preserving evidence of my capabilities and achievements, even as they struggled to understand my choices. The box represented decades of ambivalent love, concern and pride, disappointment and admiration, fear and hope, all intertwined. "I'd like to take this with me," I told him, carefully reclosing the box. It's a different version of my story than the one I've been telling myself. He nodded, understanding. We all have incomplete narratives, don't we? Perspectives limited by our positions, our fears, our assumptions about others' motives. It's taken me far too long to recognize that. The wisdom in his observation struck me deeply. How much of my own story had been shaped by assumptions about my parents' motives? How had my interpretation of their actions been filtered through? My need for autonomy, my sensitivity to judgment, my determination to prove my path valid? The memorabilia box suggested a more complex reality than the clean narrative of rejection and vindication I had constructed. That evening, after a day of sorting and packing, we took a break to meet with the attorney helping establish the foundation for my father's financial literacy program. The structure was coming together, a modest but formal nonprofit entity that could receive donations, compensate instructors, develop curriculum materials, and potentially expand to school districts beyond Cincinnati. My father had named it Foundation for Financial Empowerment, focusing on the core mission of equipping young people with knowledge and skills to make informed economic choices. The attorney reviewed governance structures, operational requirements, and compliance considerations, while I offered insights about digital infrastructure and communication strategies. Watching my father engage with these details, asking thoughtful questions, considering long-term sustainability, focusing on mission alignment rather than personal recognition, I was struck by how completely he had transformed from the status-conscious corporate executive of my youth. He had discovered authentic purpose beyond position, meaningful contribution beyond compensation, legacy beyond accumulation. We'll need to develop a simple but effective website, he noted, turning to me. Something that explains the mission, shares student success stories, provides resources for educators interested in implementing the program, and eventually allows for online donations. That's exactly the kind of project Visionary Impact specializes in, I assured him. We could develop the entire digital foundation, website, content strategy, social presence, measurement dashboard, as part of our portfolio of purpose-driven work. My mother, who had been quietly listening to the technical discussion, spoke up. It would mean so much to have you involved in building this, Alexis. To have your expertise helping shape something your father cares so deeply about. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. The daughter once rejected for her unconventional path, now contributing professional expertise to establish her father's legacy project. The skills and perspective once dismissed as impractical, now providing essential infrastructure for meaningful impact. The cycle of rejection and reconciliation completing through collaborative creation. The attorney, unaware of our complicated history, simply nodded approval at this practical arrangement. Family foundations often benefit from integrating multiple generations' skills and perspectives. It creates both sustainability and evolution over time. On my final evening in Cincinnati, after another day of packing and sorting, my parents and I took a break to have dinner at a small restaurant in the neighborhood where they would soon be living. The area had transformed significantly since my childhood. Once empty storefronts now housed independent businesses, vacant lots converted to community gardens, new residential developments designed for walkability and community interaction. This neighborhood reminds me of parts of Brooklyn, I observed as we walked from the parking area to the restaurant. The scale, the mix of businesses, the sense of community identity. My father nodded agreement. That's part of what attracted us. After visiting you in New York, we began noticing how isolating suburban living had become, especially as we've gotten older. We wanted more daily interaction, more spontaneous community engagement. The restaurant exemplified this community-centered approach, a farm-to-table concept sourcing ingredients from urban agricultural projects, staffed by graduates of a local culinary training program for disadvantaged youth, with an interior designed to encourage conversation among patrons. The owner came to our table briefly, recognizing my parents from their visits during house hunting excursions. "The Chambers family, welcome back," she greeted them warmly. "Are you getting closer to the move date?" 2 weeks away, my mother confirmed. "We're introducing our daughter to the neighborhood tonight. She lives in New York but visits regularly." Another urban dweller. Wonderful. We're building quite a community of people who appreciate city living with neighborhood feel. After she moved on to greet other patrons, I remarked on the owner's recognition of them. "You've already established connections here, even before moving in." "We've been intentional about it," my father explained. "Coming for coffee on weekend mornings, attending community events, meeting neighbors and business owners. We don't want to just occupy space here, we want to become part of the community fabric." This conscious community building represented another dimension of their transformation, from the somewhat isolated suburban existence focused on nuclear family and career achievement to intentional engagement with diverse community beyond conventional social circles. They were creating new patterns of connection and contribution in this stage of life. Over dinner, our conversation turned toward the future. My book release scheduled for the coming fall, the formal launch of my father's foundation after their move, my mother's expanding involvement with the literacy program for immigrant families, Visionary's ongoing strategic transformation. "It occurs to me that we're all in periods of significant transition," my mother observed. "Each of us evolving our contribution in meaningful ways, building on what we've learned through earlier phases." "Legacy work," my father added thoughtfully. "Not in the sense of monuments or recognition, but in terms of transmitting what we've gained through experience, knowledge, wisdom, perspective, to benefit others." The concept resonated deeply. We were each, in our distinct ways, focused on legacy building, creating frameworks, systems, and organizations that would continue generating positive impact beyond our direct involvement. This shared orientation had emerged not through following predetermined paths, but through authentic connection to purpose discovered through lived experience, including conflicts and reconciliations. "I've been thinking about the concept of disappointment," I said, referring back to the painful words that had ended my relationship with my parents years earlier. "It's an interesting term etymologically, literally meaning removed from appointment or discharged from office." My father winced slightly at the reference, but I continued. Being labeled a disappointment felt devastating because it suggested I had failed at an assigned role or purpose. But looking back, that moment of disappointment was actually liberation, freedom from a prescribed role that wasn't authentically mine to fulfill. "I never should have said those words," my father acknowledged quietly. "They reflected my own limitations, not your value or potential." "I know that now," I assured him. "But what's interesting is how that painful moment ultimately freed both of us to discover more authentic purposes. Being discharged from the appointed role of successful daughter, as defined by your parameters, allowed me to find meaningful work aligned with my actual skills and values. And eventually, your own disappointment from corporate identity through health crisis and financial challenges opened space for you to discover more meaningful contribution." My mother reached across the table to take my hand. "It's remarkable how the moments that seem most devastating can sometimes be catalysts for the most significant growth, isn't it? Not that the pain isn't real, but that transformation can emerge from it when we remain open to continued evolution." Her perspective captured the essence of our family's journey. Not a simple story of rejection and reconciliation, but a complex narrative of individual and collective transformation through conflict, separation, crisis, and reconnection. We had each been disappointed from prescribed roles and expectations, creating space for more authentic identity and contribution to emerge. Back in New York, I carried this deeper understanding into the completion of my book project. The final chapter, focused on legacy and sustainable impact, incorporated insights from these conversations with my parents, perspectives on how organizational transformation parallels personal evolution, how letting go of established identity creates space for authentic purpose, how legacy emerges through transmission of wisdom rather than accumulation of recognition. The book moved through final editing and production phases, scheduled for release in early October to coincide with the industry conference where I would deliver the keynote address. Early reviews from industry leaders who received advance copies were overwhelmingly positive, particularly noting the integration of practical frameworks with authentic personal narrative. "This isn't just another digital strategy book," wrote one prominent reviewer. "It's a roadmap for meaningful transformation that acknowledges the human dimensions of organizational change, the resistance to letting go of established patterns, the vulnerability of authentic purpose exploration, the integration of professional expertise with personal values." Chambers has created a unique contribution that will serve as an essential guide for leaders navigating digital transformation with purpose at the center. As publication approached, my parents completed their move to the downtown townhouse, donating or selling much of their accumulated possessions and creating a simpler, more intentional living environment. The foundation achieved formal nonprofit status, with initial funding from the proceeds of their home sale, supplemented by several local business leaders who recognized the value of financial literacy education. The digital infrastructure for the foundation became Visionary Impact's most recent project, with our team developing a comprehensive online presence that reflected the program's mission and impact while providing practical resources for students, educators, and potential supporters. The project exemplified the kind of purpose-driven work that would become Visionary's primary focus through the strategic transformation. Working on this project for my father's foundation brought our personal and professional reconciliation full circle. The digital skills he had once dismissed as impractical were now essential to establishing his legacy initiative. The career path he had once feared would lead to financial instability was now creating sustainable infrastructure for financial education. The daughter once labeled a disappointment was now a respected partner in building meaningful impact. The foundation's official launch coincided with the beginning of the school year, marked by a modest ceremony at the high school where my father had first begun teaching financial literacy classes. Local education officials, business leaders, and media representatives attended, along with students who had benefited from the program during its pilot phases. I flew to Cincinnati for the event, watching with pride as my father addressed the gathered community. His remarks were humble yet purposeful, focused on the students rather than his own journey or contribution. "Financial knowledge is a form of power," he told the assembled group. "Understanding how money works, how to earn it ethically, manage it wisely, invest it strategically, and share it meaningfully, creates freedom to build the life you truly want rather than the one dictated by economic necessity or consumer pressure." He continued, "My generation often measured success through accumulation and status. What I've learned, partly through my own mistakes and partly through watching these remarkable young people engage with these concepts, is that true financial empowerment isn't about gathering the most resources, but about aligning economic decisions with authentic values and purpose." His evolution was evident in every aspect of his presentation, from the content focusing on empowerment rather than conformity to his relaxed, authentic delivery style to his genuine engagement with the students he invited to share their experiences. He had transformed from a rigid authority figure imposing narrow definitions of success to a humble mentor, supporting others in discovering their own paths to meaningful achievement. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.